Hello, my name is Carly Moore. I'm an assistant program officer at the Native American Agriculture Fund, and we're so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give 2 more minutes to allow the maximum number of people to hear the webinar through. So if you'll just be patient with us and wait 2 more minutes, we'll get started. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. As I said, my name is Carly Moore, and I'm an Associate Program Officer here at the Native American Agriculture Fund. I hope you're all able to see my screen now. I just want to go through a few things setting up before we turn it over to CEO Janie Hipp to walk you through this 2020 Request for Applications webinar. We are hosting the third of 5 planned webinars. At any time, you can ask a question by going to the questions box of your GoToWebinar control panel. Just type your question in there. We'll see it immediately, but we're going to reserve questions till the end. So hopefully you can stay around with us until your question is read out loud and answered. This webinar will be recorded, so you're able to go back and view it at any time starting tomorrow. It'll be posted on our website, as are the previous webinars. So please ask us questions as we go along. We'll read those out when we get to the end. But if you have a question that's very specific and you would like to talk with us one-on-one, please do that by email to grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org or by phone by calling 479-445-6226. We'll share that contact information again later. So without any further pause, I'd like to turn this over to Janie Hipp to walk through our 2020 Request for Applications webinar. I think you were muted, Janie.
Oh, and now I'm not. Thank you, Carly. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I know it's a very stressful time for everyone. If you hear a little ding in the background, please forgive me. I'll try to not let it interrupt what I'm doing, but I'm afraid to turn it off right now because I'm afraid I'll hang up on you, and I don't want to do that. So we'll all just have to put up with a little ringing ever so often. So I apologize. Anyway, Carly, either you or Tony, I'm assuming are going to advance the slides unless you've given me power to do that.
You have power to do that.
All right. Okay. Again, Carly already shared with you lots of folks on the phone call today, and thanks for making a chance and time on your busy schedules to actually join us. We've received lots of questions from previous webinar participants, so keep them coming today, and Carly will monitor the chat box and we'll get all of those as we move along towards the end. As a reminder, and I always assume if you've been on these before, so please accept my apologies, but I always assume that we've got new folks to actually walk through some of the resources we have available and tell a little bit about the history of how we got here. NAAF is Native American Agriculture Fund. It's a private charitable trust created from the final Cypre Fund settlement of the Keepseagle litigation. The history of that litigation, you can find it following the link that's on this slide on our website. We have the history of the case there. The Board of Trustees, who were identified to stand up, along with myself, the Native American Agriculture Fund, all gathered up in kind of late summer, well, midsummer 2018, and signed the trust agreement that got us started. And the trust agreement is the document that controls how we function as NAAF. And so this private charitable trust was created with a 20-year time frame. So what that means is the funds that make up the body of the fund itself must be spent out by 2038. And so we are marching towards a deadline. And so it's very important that we all keep on schedule and that we keep working with you all to apply for funds and keep funds moving into our communities. If you look at the second bullet point there on that slide, you can actually follow that link and you can pull up the trust agreement there in its entirety and you can take a read through it. But from time to time, when we actually go over questions that you might have or go through the slides, I'll share with you what is in our trust agreement, which we can't change. It is in our enabling document. So just keep in mind that some of the things you might ask us, I'm going to refer to the trust agreement itself to actually give the answer. So this is a very short timeline of the Keepseagle case and how we got to where we are. I'm going to let you just read that on your own. I won't read it to you. The history of all of that also is on our website, as are lots of other resources that we just keep building out over time. We funded our first request for applications last year in 2019. You may hear about fast track grantees. Those were actually selected and funded before the financial resources that make up the fund were transferred to us. And so there are a set of 30 some odd fast track grantees. The list of them and what they are doing is all on our website, so you're welcome to go there and poke around and become familiar with what they're doing. We did our first request for applications last year in 2019. We committed to over 100 different projects in a little over 80 separate applicants. And so we funded quite a bit last year. This is our second request for applications. And for now, it appears that we will continue to do this on an annual cycle. That could change. That is entirely within the purview of the trustees to decide whether we stay on an annual cycle or do more every annual period, or have larger commitments or smaller commitments. It's literally decisions that they are charged with making. We also have a survey that's on our website. We keep it up there all the time. We check it every month just to see what sorts of ideas and comments that you want to make about what we should be looking at, what we should be paying attention to. So the trust agreement identifies the mission of NAAF. And the trust mission is to make grants to eligible grant recipients. And I'll get into who's eligible in a minute. All of that is in Section 8 if you're reading through the trust agreement. But it tells us that we can fund business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services to Native farmers and ranchers to support and promote their continued engagement in agriculture. That language is lifted from the trust agreement. So those are the 4 mission areas we talk about, but we also talk about eligible grant recipients. And I'll get to those in just a moment as to what type of eligibility criteria we have. Here, this slide is our current list of trustees. They were all appointed by the court in the Keepseagle case. and vetted thoroughly, and they've been hard at it, along with myself and the staff, since day one, standing up NAAF and making it ready to go so that we can actually do the grant making functions that we are charged with doing. And I'll let you just study that list, but it's an all native board, and our staff is predominantly native as well. The RFA timeline, request for application timeline for this year, is this slide. We put it out on the street. We opened it up April 1st. We are going to close the request for application period on June 1st, but we recognize the severe impact that COVID is having on everyone. Our entire staff has been working remotely since early March, and we're sure that most of you all are in the same boat. So we have built in a couple of weeks, and we call it a flexibility period, that if you can get your application into our system and press submit, that, and just let us know immediately after you press submit that you need a little bit more time, these 2 weeks, to actually gather up signatures of appropriate officials at your organization, things of that nature, or you're having some technical connectivity issues, just drop us an email quickly when you press submit and request specifically that we exercise that flexibility period and give you a couple more weeks to actually get all of your paperwork in. We've already done 2 webinars. This is our 3rd. We've got 2 more. One is on May 21st, and then the last one is on May the 28th. We'll entertain questions on just about anything, but we're hoping that that May 28th, which is right on the eve of June 1st, is really focused on any kind of technical issues that you might have, or technical questions that you might have. So please mark those on your calendar so that you can actually join us if it's possible. The other thing I'll share with you is, and I think I'm going to mention it later too, but we also have posted on our website frequently asked questions, and we are updating those after each webinar. We get questions all the time, and we are just adding to those FAQs so that you can literally have a rolling idea of who amongst potential applicants is raising what questions and what our answers are. So we post those at a regular time period right after, and if need be, we can do it additionally between webinars. So we try to keep you informed. As I've told you earlier, this flexibility closing date, this slide really just provides some additional explanation. I've already been over that. Please just be mindful that we need to hear from you so that you can literally drop us a line and ask for that flexibility in the period of closure. Here's I'm going to get into the eligible grant recipients now. This is specifically set out in the trust agreement itself. So look at section 8A for that. We are allowed to fund in those 4 mission areas, if you'll remember those. But we're also allowed to fund through 4 types of eligible grant recipients. The first one is 501c3 nonprofit organizations. And if you are involved in an organization that doesn't have your 501c3 status from the IRS yet, then we need for you to partner with a fiscal sponsor that does have that 501c3 status. Or I suppose you could partner with other organizations that are eligible in their own right, but community groups can actually participate in that. They just got to hook themselves onto an eligible organization under the trust agreement language. The second area that is eligible are educational organizations, and there's a pretty long list of those that are identified in that section of the Internal Revenue Code that's put out there. I'm not going to go over those with you, but clearly tribal colleges are allowed, but also there's technical schools can apply, non-native educational institutions can apply. There's a fairly long list. The third area is community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, and those include certified native CDFIs and also emerging native CDFIs, provided though that the CDFI is a tax-exempt organization described in Section 501c3. That language is drawn from the trust agreement. And then finally, the fourth category of eligible recipients of grant funds are tribal governments, and these can be either state or federally recognized tribal governments, or an instrumentality of a state or federally recognized tribe. And that can include a nonprofit organization chartered under the tribal law of a state or federally recognized tribe that provides assistance designed to further native farming and ranching. However, provided, that the use of the grant funds is restricted exclusively to charitable and educational purposes, and the grant recipient is required to annually provide us audited financial statements and reports as we deem necessary. And if the grant recipient is a governmental entity, it has to provide a limited waiver of sovereign immunity with respect to NAAF's right to enforce the terms of the grant. In other words, it needs to be a limited waiver of sovereign immunity, limited to the amount of the funding awarded and to the time period that the grant actually covers. And then finally, the grant recipient has to agree to comply with expenditure responsibility requirements that we place in our grant agreements. But I want to kind of emphasize the waiver issue. All of the tribal governments that we provided an offer to fund their grant in 2019, all except for two actually had no problems with and provided us a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. We are not allowed to provide funds to a tribal government if we don't have the limited waiver in place. And Tony on our team, who's going to come on later, is really our point person on that, and she works closely with our legal counsel. We have some draft resolutions and draft language that we can share with tribal governments about things that they should consider putting in those limited waivers of sovereign immunity. But the language on that third sub-bullet right in front of you right now, you'll notice that it says shall. And this is an area that is very specific in the trust agreement, and we have to have it in place or we can't provide the funding. So we always get questions about this, but understand that we have a team on our team that literally will work hand in glove with the tribal government and their legal counsel to get all of that proper documentation in place. But it is an absolute requirement on our end. Again, if you don't have your 501c3 status, don't let it stop you. We can work with a fiscal sponsor that works with you, so long as that fiscal sponsor has 501c3 determination by the Internal Revenue Service. We need verification of your eligibility. I mean, you're either one of four, and some of you may have multiple eligibility hats that you can wear, but we need proper documentation. We ask for it in the application process. These are standard documents that you likely already have your fingers on, but just let us know if you're having trouble getting hold of the proper documentation. That kind of flexibility time period is built in for that kind of purpose, because we realize, you know, a lot of people's offices are closed or partially closed, fully closed. And so we realize there could be some hiccups right now. So we want to be flexible in that. The other thing is, keep in mind that the trust agreement says native farmers and ranchers. Those were the claimants and the plaintiffs in the case, the Keepseagle case. But even from the first day, the trustees have been very specific about, you know, in their minds, farmers and ranchers can have a pretty broad context. It obviously are folks who do livestock, It also can be folks who grow all sorts of food or fiber products. It can be fishers, it can be those who work in forest products. It can be harvesters and gatherers, and also those working in community agriculture, community gardens, food hubs, farmers markets. Many of you who already know this, food and agriculture is pretty broad. And we just, if you have a question about whether you come under this more broad definition of farmer rancher, just let us know. We're not going to always list everything. So when we say farmer and rancher, just understand that we mean we have a pretty expansive definition of what that means. We also are interested, and you'll see it in the request for application itself, we're actually interested also in projects that can work with those who are trying to become farmers and ranchers. Maybe they're younger, and they're just getting started, or maybe they're older and they're quit another career and they're retired and they're getting into farming for the first time. So we are interested in seeing projects that are working with audiences that are seeking to become farmers and ranchers, because we are interested in promoting that and encouraging that. Again, those 4 key areas, which are our mission areas, are business assistance, agricultural education, technical support, and advocacy services. And if you're scratching your head and wondering what those mean, they can mean quite a lot. And so in preparing for your application to be submitted, take the time to go to our website and actually pull down the types of projects that were funded previously to the fast track grantees, not by us, but by another group. But also take a look at the 2019 grantees, because we got them all listed there, and just a thumbnail sketch of what their project that we funded was. So you'll see a wide variety of work. So just do it. Take a few moments to kind of browse through that and kind of see if what you're thinking about proposing is something brand new we've never seen before, or is in alignment with things we've already funded. The trust agreement controls the eligible uses and eligible entities. We always refer back to it. But if you actually read the trust agreement in depth, you're going to see that we are not allowed to directly fund individual native farmers or ranchers with either grant money or loan money. What we can do is we can fund those 4 types of eligible organizations, and then they can do grants to individuals, farmers and ranchers, and they can do loans to individual farmers and ranchers. We just can't do it at NAAF directly to individuals. We're not allowed to do that. Last year, we had a variety of projects. We had some 12-month projects. We had some 18-month projects. We had some 24-month projects that we funded. I think most of the fast track grantees were 24-month projects, but the ones we did last year were kind of a smattering of a little bit of all. And so what we did do this year is, we did tell everybody that we're interested in no more than 2 years in duration. And we also are interested in, and we've already funded work that would support scholarships or re-granting, as I said earlier, or lending, or even capital expenditures. So those are all acceptable for us. We really, this and the next slide really talks about what we're not really either able to fund or under the trust agreement or interested in funding at this time. We have 4 mission areas: business assistance, ag ed, technical support, and advocacy services. So organizations that are proposing projects to us that don't sit in those spaces, that's not within our mission as identified in the trust agreement, so we are not going to fund those. Work based outside the U.S., none of the Keepseagle claimants were anybody but people who lived within the domestic U.S. And so we take that very seriously, and we're not going to be funding international work. There's plenty of work to do here. We also some of these bullet points here are a little bit interesting to try to understand. But many times individual farmers and ranchers can need services, but the services aren't agriculture related. So we're not interested in funding things that are not ag and food related. There needs to be a line, drawn back into, you may be helping a native farmer and rancher, but if it doesn't have anything to do with agriculture, then that's going to be skirting up right to the edge of what we're interested in funding. We really need for you to think about what's going to help in the success of our agriculturalists, all the people who work in those areas of farming, ranching, food production, fishers, all of the ones listed when I discussed briefly earlier about what it means to be a farmer rancher. We really need you to basically drive into the kinds of assistance they need to further their success. We also need to think about, or you need to think about, projects and activities that would be of a charitable and educational purpose. That's really important for nonprofits and trusts like ours that do grant making work, to really think about what is needed that would be charitable and educational in focus. The trust agreement is very specific. We are not allowed to fund anything that would fund litigation. And so if you put forward a project that is literally to support a litigation fund, we will not fund it. We also are prohibited to do direct lobbying as defined by the IRS. So we can do advocacy, but hiring lobbyists to actually go and lobby the Hill is not something we are going to do. Others can do that and bring that to bear in a particular project, but our funds need to be focused on the other forms of advocacy that are so terribly important. And also, if you're an educational organization, you don't have to work exclusively with native farmers and ranchers. You can educate a whole lot of other people. But we need for your project to really drive into the native farmer and rancher educational needs and support needs from your educational institution. We received last year, and we are receiving questions again this year. Fast track grantees that got fast track money are eligible for additional funding from NAAF. The 2019 funded grantees that we funded through our 2019 request for application, they're eligible also to apply for 2020 funding. We just need for those types of grantees, either fast track or our own from 2019, to actually propose either new projects or continuations of previously funded work, but it's basically reached a new stage. You got finished with one piece of it, you're still wanting to work in that space, it's just at another phase. And so just be mindful of those two things when you put your application together. And again, this last little paragraph on this page talks about community-based organizations. Please just search out an eligible organization that you can work with who can take the lead, because we know the importance of smaller, community-based organizations. We get it, but the trust agreement won't let us fund you directly. We have to have it through one of those 4 eligible entity types that are listed in the trust agreement. And then I want you to keep in mind, and we talk about this all the time, the Keepseagle litigation involved issues that were really at the core of access to credit and discrimination in access to credit. And so we actually have incorporated into our evaluation criteria when we review applications we receive, this issue is what are you doing, or what piece of your puzzle that you put together for your work can actually help us, all of us, in this area of access to credit, and really kind of think more specifically about that. And I'm going to come back to this when I go through the evaluation pieces. And the request for applications, actually kind of towards the latter part of that document, the request for application document, we actually give you examples of what it means to work in areas of access to credit. So we also have, I think, included some examples of that in our frequently asked questions. So I think we've given you several prompts that you can take a look at and see and be thinking of how to include that component. We're fine if you want to combine focus areas and do business assistance and technical support, or agricultural education and technical support. Some of these areas are so broad in their definition that they almost seem to overlap, even to me. So we're fine if you collapse and talk about multiple things. You'll see some language in the request for applications that talks about value-added agriculture. And we remain very interested in funding projects that are about value added. And you know, a pretty simple Google search will tell you that in agriculture, and when you're talking about value added agriculture, you're literally taking the raw product itself, like broccoli, and turning it into something else. You're not just selling, you know, a clump of broccoli. You're packaging it, you're marketing it, you're putting a label on it, you're branding it with your particular tribe's name, or you're cutting it and slightly processing, you're making it just broccoli florets, or you're making it just pieces of the broccoli. You'll see, go to the grocery store, you can see that's just tons of value-added food products in any convenience store or grocery store. They're all over the place. But the value-added piece, we are very much interested in that, because this is an area where our farmers and ranchers and our fishers can add value and really help their businesses along. Again, on the educational side, it's okay with us if you actually have folks in the classroom, and right now it's all virtual, that are a mix of native students and non-native students. But whatever you're doing needs to be focusing on improving the success and improving the viability of native farmers and ranchers, and those folks who sit and support all of us who are interested in having a really strong native food systems out there, and really strong producers of food products. And so the project can't just be so random that it really doesn't focus on the needs primarily of who in your educational audience are native folks, and what are you trying to do to help native producers and the next generation of native producers, or the next generation of native educators, for instance. So if you got any questions about that, just give us a holler, and we can further clarify. So the 2020 funding areas, for those of you who applied in 2019, you're going to see some similarity in how we approach this. We have two big areas, and then another one that's within the second area. The first big area is targeted, and we call them targeted because we're really setting aside pools of resources for each one of the 4 types of eligible organizations that we're authorized to fund. And so the target, when you look at that part of the request for applications and it talks about targeted, you're going to see that we've broken down our discussion within those 501c3, educational, CDFI, and tribal governments areas, and given you ideas to think about. Then you're going to see a special emphasis group of areas that we're interested in funding. We did that last year, and we're doing it again this year. Those areas are traditional foods, food sovereignty, agricultural extension, advocacy, and youth programming. Now, if you're interested in the youth programming, then understand that we are taking a slightly different twist on youth programming this year, and I'll explain it in just a minute. So I'm going to deal with our first area of targeted funding, which is CDFIs. CDFIs do a lot of things, but the primary areas that they do are loan products to farmers and ranchers and others. And they also provide a lot of very important and helpful technical assistance. So we're seeking funding applications that will help CDFIs do those things even more. And we don't require that they have a certain percentage of their available pool for their overall available pool for lending to farmers and ranchers. But the funds that you would get from NAAF would really need to be targeted solely into native farming and ranching support through loan products or technical assistance. So you can actually have within your CDFI a whole different set of Main Street or other small businesses or however you call it of folks that you work with, but we're going to fund you just for the native farmer and rancher agriculture piece. We have established a pool of $4 million this year to fund projects proposed by CDFIs. We want you to do one of two things. We want you to either tell us what your current ag lending portfolio is, but if you're just getting into this, then we're okay with that because we want to encourage more CDFIs to actually be in agriculture lending. But please tell us, you need to tell us what the need is. And what we've said is if you've got public input from your service area of folks who are coming in and wanting you to do ag lending with them, that is great. Talk about that. You could also talk about what the National Ag Census says about agricultural people, farmers, ranchers who are in the area that you serve, just by doing a little bit of research in the Ag Census data itself. So just be ready to talk about what you're already doing or what you're prepared to do and how you got triggered into this knowing that there's a need. There's no set limit on the amount of total available funding for any one project, but we don't want any one project to ask for the entire pool because our desire is to fund as many CDFIs as we can every year. So we just need you to be thinking about how much you're going to ask for in a realistic sort of way, realizing that we want you to not exceed the whole pool in one application. Part of the reason for that is that there's a growing number of CDFIs and who have a growing need for agricultural lending pools of funds. And we need to have as many CDFIs out there working in this space as possible. So if you could, just talk about it in your application in terms of how you got to the idea of how much you're really asking for this year. The next I'm going to turn to in the 4 types is educational organizations. And this can be a wide variety of activities that educational organizations can seek funding for. A lot of educational organizations have no students in their buildings right now, which we totally understand. We also understand there's a lot of uncertainty around that. But just let us know what you think you should be able to do, later in 2020 and beyond in food and agriculture related classroom training, classroom education programs. And by that, we don't mean only in the building. Right now, classroom should be interpreted to mean virtual as well. And however you can actually assemble your engagement with your students. It can be a wide variety of agricultural programs or professional degree programs. You can apply for funds to provide scholarships for Native students. It can be curriculum development. It can be applied research, but we really need you to kind of drive into the space of what agriculture needs, what food needs, what food sovereignty needs that can come through educational organizations. And we're happy to entertain any questions you might have about how we use terminology. There's all sorts of ways to talk about what we're interested in funding. There is not one right or wrong way, and so we need you to reach out if you've got any questions. The projects for educational organizations can also include community technical assistance. Anything that would be happening within the community to improve access to food, or focusing on food sovereignty or traditional foods activities central to food systems improvement in Indian country. Training, educational activities, or technical support should be made available to Native students and can be provided as a non-degree program or a degree program or a certificate program. You know, there's all sorts of ways to provide additional education and training in these spaces. And we're looking for projects that can improve food sovereignty, food access, improve subsistence activities, as well as all the way into STEM careers and agricultural sciences related to food and ag, conservation. There's all sorts of ways that food production and food systems need help and need folks who really are in the weeds, literally, on things such as water quality and soil health and ecology and botany. I mean, you name it. So just this is an area that should not be interpreted narrowly, I don't think. We've established a total pool of $2 million funding for this pool for this year. Again, there's no upper or lower limit on the amount of funds that you can request. Just keep in mind that we ask you not to exceed the total pool in your request. And I'm going to get into overhead limitations in a little bit because those apply across the board to everyone. 501c3 organizations. Again, this is an area that can be pretty broad in terms of the activities that folks are involved in. Again, I encourage y'all to take a look at what we funded in the past to give you ideas. We do ask that you tell us how you're already serving Native farmers and ranchers, or how you're preparing to serve them, and get very specific, as specific as you can be, about your knowledge of the folks that you are intending to work with. And we totally understand about the impacts of COVID. We actually had several 2019 grantees who have already flipped their approach. They're working with the same audience, they're doing the same thing, they're just doing it on YouTube. And so just be creative in that respect, but obviously be mindful of any kind of public health orders that are in place at your tribe or in the areas in which you work. And the other thing is, some nonprofits have multiple areas that they work in. We appreciate that, but NAAF funds really need to be focused on the kinds of activities that you're going to be doing in your food and your food systems and your food sovereignty and your agriculture and farmer and rancher fisher space. We appreciate that you may work in multiple other areas, but we need you to drive into the spaces that support the audience that we're dedicated to serve through NAAF. If you're a startup, I've already mentioned it, you should be seeking out a fiscal sponsor. 501c3s, when you get your documentation from the IRS, it will literally say you are recognized as and certified to act as a 501c3. A couple of folks last year submitted their employer identification number as their proof of 501c3 status, and that's not the form that IRS sends you to grant you status. So if you've got questions about forms from the federal government about what constitutes the type of organization that you are coming in under, just send us an email or pick up the phone and call. Then you're going to see when you read the request for applications that we've inserted some language that's going to be similar kind of across many categories. And we inserted that language because we knew, as we were literally getting this request for applications finalized and ready to be made public, we knew that COVID was happening. It was already affecting our operations. And so we put in there, it's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but we also put in some ideas of things we were looking for in terms of resiliency planning, intertribal cooperative efforts within regions to bolster native food systems. Some of these things are already happening organically as we speak. Response plans for coordinated food production, planning for cooperative and coordinated food purchases, pandemic and disaster food access response and contingency planning. Economic analysis to determine the impacts that y'all are feeling right now and how to plan for and accommodate where we need to all be going, as we move through the COVID situation. Planning activities to regionalize or localize food systems. Some of this work is already happening, and some of our 2019 grantees are already starting to be flexible, and we're working with them to be flexible to add things to their current work that literally start to move into some of these spaces that are COVID response spaces and recovery spaces. So know that we're looking for that. We were mindful of what was happening in real time as we were getting ready to send this out the door. And so you'll see that language that was in that prior slide kind of scattered in a few other places. But understand we would love it if you would talk about that in your application and in what you're thinking that you want to do. For 501c3s this year, we've upped the pool, and we are looking at a pool that's at $3 million. Again, there's no upper or lower limit on the amount of funding you could seek, but we really do ask you to not try to seek the whole pool, because we want to fund, as we did last year, a lot of projects in 501c3 eligible area. Again, indirect limitations apply, and I'll get to that in a minute. The fourth area is tribal governments. For tribal governments, we are looking for a lot of we got a lot of good projects last year from tribal governments, really kind of walking into this whole value added space, because I think they recognize and we recognize that this is an area for growth. It's also going to be an area that tribes can kind of lean into to recover from this COVID situation as well. And so anything in the space of value added or regionalized or localized food systems development to really drive into stabilizing our food systems for short, mid, and long-term needs of our communities, and resiliency is really, really important. Lots of organizations can do that, but we also put that kind of resiliency language in the tribal government area as well. On value-added projects, some of those can actually result in the building of buildings that can house a food hub or that can house a processing plant. And so many of those kinds of activities require a lot more capital, but part of the building blocks to get there are feasibility studies. And so we funded several feasibility studies last year. We were interested in that again this year. And that can really come down to putting together an application that seeks funding to support the consulting services that you need: architectural, engineering, legal, technical advisors, food safety advisors, all those sorts of kind of ancillary activities that are central to the success of value-added projects. We are, again, I inserted the same language that you saw previously about COVID response and resiliency planning vis-a-vis tribes. And we're also looking at, too, some things that we were looking at last year. We're interested in helping tribes to get their arms around agricultural resource management planning as a specific thing that they should be doing to actually get in place some more structure around how their tribe is going to actually deploy their agricultural resources in more sustainable ways. Critical infrastructure and figuring out what those are. In the middle of COVID, in the early days of the COVID recognition in the US that we were facing something of pretty epic proportions, it was reminded the feds actually have done this periodically over many decades, but the administration also, again, basically reaffirmed that food and agriculture is critical infrastructure to the US. We all know it's critical infrastructure to tribes as well. So if you've got ideas that really talk about putting legs under critical infrastructure for your tribe, please consider working on a project proposal that would incorporate that. Cooperative food purchasing, cooperative food marketing, all those sorts of things that are really coordinated and cooperative across your tribe if you have a lot of producers, but also across multiple tribes is something we'd be interested in as well. And then finally, last year we had hemp feasibility studies as one of the special emphasis areas. We didn't list it as a separate special emphasis area this year, but we did include the same language that we talked about last year in this year's targeted funding for tribes, because it still is an area of interest for tribes. I got a notice this morning that I think 5 or 6 new tribal hemp plans were just approved by USDA, and right now the tribal governments are far outstretching the state governments in getting these plans approved. So we're happy to entertain applications that would keep that ball rolling and help you get the resources that you need to do those feasibility and planning of projects, looking out, longer into the horizon. We've got a pool of 200,000 here, and because what we're actually looking at here, we think will be predominantly feasibility projects. We are looking at funding at the 150,000 cap level. But again, you can definitely put in for higher amounts. We we're likely going to fund most tribes at that 150,000 level. So now I'm going to switch to special emphasis funding. And as we did last year, we had 4 areas. This year we have 4, but I'm going to put that youth programming piece aside because I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. So traditional foods and food sovereignty, agricultural extension, and advocacy and youth. For each one of these 4, we have set aside a total of $1 million each for each of the 4 special emphasis areas. That is double the amount that we focused on providing for the special emphasis areas last year. We're looking in the area of traditional foods and food sovereignty for projects in kind of the range of 50 to 100,000. And that can be all over the map in terms of wide-ranging activities that can support traditional foods and food sovereignty movements and local community food activities. Some of those are listed here. Activities in response to COVID, follow-up activities related to what you've already done on food sovereignty assessments, scaling up existing programs to really increase production levels or expand the scope of what you've already been doing. Establishing new focus areas for your existing food sovereignty and traditional foods programs is of interest as well. This next area is advocacy. We are strong believers. Obviously, one of the 4 mission areas that NAAF is required to focus on is advocacy. And so we held off last year in terms of actually getting our arms around this, but this year we are far enough out from the 2018 Farm Bill that we really recognize the need to start to gather our resources and support around the Native Farm Bill Coalition efforts that were so successful in the 2018 Farm Bill in getting just a significant number of new pieces of the law that support Native agriculture kind of writ large. We know that work needs to be ongoing, and so we are putting $1 million into advocacy work. That's the pool that's available there. and we want applications that can propose multiple years of activities in sort of the run up and the importance of the advocacy work that really has to be included to support native agriculture, long term. It should talk about COVID issues, but it should not just be COVID. So just read through that if you're interested in the advocacy piece, and that gives you some ideas about what we're looking at there. Youth programming. Now, one of the first things that the trustees ever said when they started strategic planning was recognizing the need to actually put our arms around and support Native youth in agriculture and people who were beginning the journey of being a part of our food systems. And so that is really an important thing that they recognized early on. Youth engagement in agriculture can be anything from K through 12 classroom or virtual classroom, youth gardens, youth ag policy councils, 4-H FFA, youth food summits, mobilizing Native youth to take on more responsibility and engagement. It's just almost endless. Hands-on food production, youth-led activities of any kind, regional and national youth leadership in ag projects. I mean, it's kind of exciting and endless when you start to dig into this particular space. We've set aside $1 million for youth programming, which is double the amount that we set aside last year. We're really wanting to fund as many projects as we can, so we're looking to fund smaller projects for up to $50,000. But understand, and Tony's going to share a little bit more detail about this in a minute, but if you're going to apply for youth programming in that $1 million pool, your open period for your application started April 1st, but the closing period for youth programming is going to be September 1st. And what that tells you is we're going to leave that application process open for a longer period of time, and we're going to be taking up and reviewing and funding on a rolling basis as we move along in that time period. So you're not really kind of under that, imminent closing period as some of the other projects would be, but just be sure and mark it on your calendar for sure. Tony will share with you the separate application portal that you're going to need to look at. And then the final area that is our special emphasis area is really understanding and supporting the role of agricultural extension. What we're looking for here are projects and proposals from tribal colleges and universities, land grant institutions, or other eligible organizations that really focus on how to deliver technical support and assistance and knowledge and working alongside our food people. And in the area of agriculture, most folks who are actually doing the hard work of planting or caring for our animals, they just don't always have the time to go around and gather information that they might need to support them on an ongoing basis. They depend on a team that helps them. And this is an area where we recognize that the federally recognized Tribal Extension Professionals Program, FERTAP, as well as the extension-related activities of tribal colleges and universities have been poorly funded for years. And so we are putting aside $1 million this year, particularly to get started on a broader vision here, a 21st century native agriculture extension, and what that looks like and what we need to actually build out as support systems around our farmers and ranchers and food champions and fishers. And so that's what we're looking for in this particular pool. We don't have it in mind that any organization is going to be the perfect lead for this. We really are hoping that you all can talk amongst yourselves and figure out what a really strong, multifaceted, comprehensive approach would be, so that we can actually start to advocate and actually start to support a more blended system that sits around all of our producers, because the low level of funding that we've received from federal sources for so long, we know that we've got to add more to the pool here. So that's what we're looking for from that. Think about how your work integrates what's going on in your community with Native leadership. Think about what kind of things you want to be getting done in the next year. And we know a lot of folks are having difficulty right now, even planning beyond COVID, but we know how creative the folks are who work with our food people. And so we're excited to see what you come up with, because we know it's going to be strong, and we know it's going to be building on resilience and getting us prepared to move through the immediate crisis and on to recovery and building out our community's food systems in an even stronger way. We have established some kind of 7 basic criteria, evaluation criteria. They're going to be pretty common sense to you when I talk you through them in just a few seconds, but just keep them in mind when you're actually pulling together your proposal. Tell us about your leaders, tell us about your board members, tell us about your community, and tell us about how important it is for this work to be done. Those kinds of stories we long to hear, and we know you're waiting to tell them to us. And so please be prepared to do that. The criteria for review, if you look towards the end of the actual request for application document that's on our website, you can download it, you can just look at it on the web, whatever you want to do. You're going to see 7 areas, and they're listed right here. And if you go to that part of the request for applications document, you can read through what we're looking at for each one. Proposed results. Is there a demand for this work? How do you know that? I mean, who are you talking to within your community that can really tell the story about why this is so important? What does your team look like? What do they bring to the table? If you've got collaborators or people that you work with or consultants on your work, tell us about them. We do, as I mentioned earlier, want you to speak to this impact on access to credit. If you read through the request for applications, you'll get some prompts to kind of think about what that looks like. Are you going to be evaluating what kind of impact you're making as you move along? Tell us about that. If you look at what we describe it as, you're going to get some hints and ideas about how to structure this. Is the work you're doing innovative? Sometimes innovation for our communities is literally going back to what our ancestors taught us in the first place. And so it doesn't have to be brand new, fresh off the shelves innovative. It can literally be taking us out of our current rut and going back to what we know to be right, according to our teachings. And then when we talk about wide application and replicability, it's really not replication. It's how can what you're doing be adjusted and maybe be used by another community to improve their situation. And so when we ask you to talk about those kinds of things, there are pieces of all of the stuff that all of us are doing that with minor or even major adjustments here and there, we can actually take to another location and help people there try on what worked for you with slight modifications. Just talk us through that if you can. There's some mandatory documents. We've got a list of them on our website in the checklist form so that you can actually see exactly what we're needing you to upload. Most of them are pretty simple to lay your hands on and pull up into a document. We actually do, and Tony's probably going to hint on this too, but we actually need you to PDF your documents, and so please keep that in mind. I think I've touched on most of the other things that are on this particular slide. And I know I've also touched on the use of the funds. We really need you to use the funds as designed by you. and we'll work with you if along the way you think your budget should be modified or you need some extra time to implement something. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call us and work with us, and we're really flexible. I will also share with you that if you become a grantee, one of our staff will be assigned as a point of contact, and they're there to remind you when we need stuff from you, but also to be there as a resource for you. So if you run into a bump along the way, just know that your point of contact is there and available to you to help you get over that hump. Or maybe, you know, if we hear and are working with grantees somewhere else, and you're kind of running into a problem that they already ran into and solved, we want to be that conduit back and forth so that we can all learn from each other. The project budget, we're only asking on our budget forms for the funding that you're requesting from NAAF. We have a format that is downloadable. You can actually go online and on our website and actually pull down budget guidelines, budget templates, a sample budget narrative. It's all right there. So just pull that down, take a look at it as you're pulling yours together. When you actually do get your budget document ready to upload, be sure and label it accordingly so that we know who you are and we know what your organization is. Make sure that you tell us. There's actually a prompt that will ask you what time period your project is going to cover when you go through the project process. If you're doing a 2-year project, we need you to have 2 separate columns, one for year 1 and one for year 2, but that's all pretty self-explanatory if you actually look at the budget guidelines in the forms themselves. And then here's a slide that gives you some tips as you're actually trying to PDF your document. Sometimes, and I'm the worst one here, sometimes you can forget to wrap the text or check your math and make sure your numbers are clearly visible. Just kind of do that last double check. And I haven't said it before. I should have said it right at the beginning, but I'll close out with saying, please get in the system right now. And Tony will take over in just a second and walk you through that. But please make sure you get into the system and get yourself registered as an applicant in the system. And again, Tony will share with that, but just the sooner you start this process, the better. It's not as complicated as you might think, but please don't wait till the last minute, although half of you probably will. And so I always did when I was writing grants, so I confess. Again, this is budget categories. This is just general descriptions. I will tell you straight up what I said on the last webinar. I really think that when you put your meetings and travel, go ahead and put aside some money in your budget for meetings and travel, because honestly, none of us really know when travel is going to open back up. And so our advice to you is to go ahead and put some portion of your budget in that. But if this just drags on and on and on, all we have to do if you're a grantee is trade some emails, pick up the phone, and we will work with you to collapse that travel budget into another category so that you can use the money for other purposes and not for travel. But you know, we are not planning on travel ourselves because we don't know what the guidance is going to be. So, you know, everyone's in a state of flux on that. Our guidance to you is go ahead and put something in that category, and then we'll work with you if you're funded to actually pull it into other categories so you can just add to your work. If you look at the budget documents, there's going to be some lines towards the bottom for the intermediary funds piece, which is money that you intend to set aside for re-grants or loans or scholarships if you're going to do that. So just understand we want you to capture that amount in the budget narrative, but also in the budget form. And then finally, as to indirect costs, this is, you know, overhead or administrative costs that a lot of folks who are in the grant writing world capture into their project. And so we, and some of those can be quite the percentages of indirects can be quite high. If you're a regular federal grant, applicant, you'll be well familiar with indirect limitations, but also not limitations. But for NAAF purposes, we're not going to allow any more than 15% of your budget to be recaptured as indirect or overhead administrative costs. So Tony, I think it's yours from now on, and before we move into any kind of questions.
Great, thank you, Janie. Hello, my name is Tony Stanger, and I'm a member of the Colville Confederated Tribes, and I'm calling in from Spokane, Washington today. And you will have to forgive me. Last week, I warned you guys my kids would be in the background, and today my neighbor's getting a new roof. So forgive any background noise. I'm going to walk you through what it looks like to apply in our online system. And whenever you hear us use the word Foundant, that's the software, the grant software that we use. And it's a company based out of Bozeman, Montana. They serve thousands and thousands of nonprofits and other entities that administer grants. And we've been using them for 2 years now. And those that applied for the fast track funding also entered the Foundant system because they use Foundant as well. So we'll start with where you go to apply. When you go to apply, you can go to our website to find this information. We have multiple areas where you can find the login to get into where the grant software exists. One of the areas is the click start here. On our website, you can go to the grants header at the top, and any one of those locations will provide you some more information and a direct link. But if you were an applicant last year or through the fast track, you likely have already linked yourself to Foundant. If you are a fast tracker, the link has changed slightly, so you might need to update to our link or update your user profile within the system. But we use this software to make life easier for both of us. We've improved our application from last year. Last year was our first year getting into the system and creating the grants, which we call processes. Our first process, we were very fortunate to get out in last year. The trustees had made a promise that within their first year they would get a funding cycle out, and they were able to do that with our system and using Foundant. You click the log on page, and if you need to get back in there, you might have this information saved already, your email and password if you've already been in there. If you haven't, then you will create an account. And in order to create an account, you are going to have an email that will eventually become your username. Before you click this and enter an email, make sure that you, as the person that's going to fill this out for your organization, your educational institution, or your tribe, that you are the person that's going to maintain status in this system. You are going to be the main point of contact in this system coming in and out, because only one email or point of contact can be in this system at one time. You can have two people that can access this, but we will have one main point of contact, or a grant lead, and that person is the first one to enter here. So if you, for instance, have someone who leaves their job, then we can change this information, but please just make sure that when you get to this page, read our RFA first. Go, and you can see the links on the right side. Read the application questions on our website. They're in a PDF format, so you can see what all the questions we're going to ask within the system before you go on and create your account, because we pull reports and we want to know how many people are applying and where they're getting hung up in their application. And if we have people that just get in there to see what it looks like and then exit, then we have to trace that, because we want to make sure it's not something that it's our fault on our end. But once you create your account and you have your log on, then you will move on to filling out your organizational information. So one more thing about creating your username. We had people that, and last year we had different terms for the user and the organization, our background information. Where we got people hung up is they thought that the person that needed to enter this information was the final signatory. Maybe it's your tribal chairman, maybe it's a dean of your program, but that's not the person that gets in here and works every day. So we want to make sure the person who creates the username is the person who's going to get in here, that's going to be available to us when we need new information or to update information. So while creating a new account, you're going to enter your user organization information. If you have your EIN, you can enter it now. We also have an area where you can enter that later. We have a website and organizational email, your addresses, your state, county, and postal zip code. After you've entered all that information, you'll click next and it will take you to fill out additional information. And this is where last year we had signing authority confusion. You can have the information of your CFO, whoever it might be that in your instance is the signatory for the overall application. You can have them in here, but we really want to make sure that the main point of contact is the person that has a username and has access to this system. So when you're evaluating who might fill this out, think about if you're a tribe and you have an agriculture department, maybe like my tribe has a range office, and if the range officer is going to be the one who's going to get in here, maybe it's going to be your grant office, grants and agreements office. Just make sure that person is going to be consistently in here. Then you'll answer these areas down here: project contact information, signing authority question, signing authority information, and password. You'll enter all of that information, and then you will have a submit button. Once you've completed that, you'll get a confirmation email. You do not need to check the confirmation email before moving forward, but we would like you to make sure that that email goes through to your account, because that is within the Found It system. That's the email that we will have from here on out, and we don't want to be emailing you an award notification and then saying, hey, we awarded you and we haven't heard back from you because the email account was somehow messed up. So this is your opportunity to make sure that the emails are going to your inbox. So again, you can continue without checking it, or you can check and make sure you've got that email. Then you'll see the continue button on your bottom right. You click that and it will take you to the apply page. Like Janie said, we have two different processes, our applications out right now. We have our 2020 general and we have our 2020 youth. And the 2020 youth will be located below the 2020 general. You can't see it right here, but you'll have an option to scroll down on your right, and that's where you'll see the application for the 2020 youth. Once you click that apply button, it'll ask you what process are you applying for, and you can't go through them at the same time, but you pick which one you want to fill out first. And again, the youth has a September deadline where the 2020 general has a June deadline. After you've clicked that apply button, depending on if you're a new applicant or you're a former applicant, you're going to have some additional buttons. But for those that are new, it's a multi-step process. You will enter, we have these gray box areas, and if you're calling in and you can't see this, there's different kind of tabs, and those are called groups. And these different groups have various questions within inside of them. And they're either check the box or fill in the blank. You will fill all those out, and when you fill out all of the required questions, and all of the required questions have a star, like the asterisk next to them, once all of those are filled out, you can push a submit button. But you'll enter your project services, your organizational information, your applicant information, your project financials, and the final section is your required uploads. All uploads will need to be in PDF format. You will not be able to upload them unless they are in PDF format. Last year, we had a handful of applicants on the day of closing for our 2019 RFA, and by that evening, we had over 100. And we had so many people on the last minute contacting us frantically saying, I'm not able to upload. So we encourage you, go in there early, make sure your uploads are complete, make sure that we have character and space limits, make sure that you're able to meet those, because you, if you wait till the last minute, you're not going to be able to get to that. And we did stay up late. I stayed up until midnight last year. We and a number of us worked over the weekend to answer your questions leading up to our closing date. But when there's 4 minutes left before the application closes and you can't upload, we really can't help you. So make sure you get in there early to make sure that all of your uploads work. Again, these are what the upload buttons look like. And as you can see, we have increased significantly and in some areas quadrupled the amount of space that you have to upload. And the character limits have all been at almost doubled. And in certain areas, we've taken the character space, the fill in the blank typing space out, and we've made it a box check because we realized we asked you similar questions. We maybe asked you the same question 3 different ways, and we didn't realize it when we were writing our application. So this year, after reviewing all of the applications, we realized, well, if we just take apart from this question and add it to this question, we can eliminate a whole area. So like I said, we've made it way easier this year. But these are required documents that have to be in every project. So we have our target area funding, and we have our special emphasis area funding. And within those, you can be an entity that can apply for multiple areas. But when you apply for multiple areas, these are your different projects. And each project must have its own project template and project narrative. We have guidelines that are in blue. You click those, they automatically download to your computer. We have a sample budget and a sample narrative. And we also have made it pretty easy. We've created a template budget. You click on it uploads or downloads to your computer, you fill in all your information, you save as a PDF, and then you upload it where this upload button is. And you'll do that for your narrative and your budget template for every project in your application. If you're only applying for one project area, then you're just doing it one time. So again, if you have any questions uploading, please let us know. We do have an upload format. We want to make sure that we can come back and keep when we're reviewing your application, we want to make sure that we know that it's a 2020 application, the type of funding it is, so we have abbreviations for the various types, and your organizational name. That's just to in your Found It system, it's protected, and the only people that can get in there are the person who creates the account, and then we have a few administrators on our end that can get in there, but otherwise this is a very secure portal and nobody else will see this information. But this is just another way to make sure that we keep your documents included in your overall application packet. After you've completed your uploads and you've pushed the blue submit button at the bottom of your application, you will have what's called a dashboard. And your dashboard within the Found It system will show you what you've applied for. Some of you will have historical records in here because you applied for the 2020 or 2019 application, or maybe you have an active youth application and a general application at the same time. All of that information will be on your dashboard. This is just a draft dashboard, and it says I'm applying for the 2020 NAAF general, and then it gives me a deadline. Eventually within this dashboard, you'll have decision information. You'll have, if you're a successful awardee, you'll have your award information. And again, if you have applied before, you'll have your historical requests as well. And now back to if you are a former application, you will have extra buttons. And this is a really great, this is something that we added this year that we didn't know that we had access to last year because it was our first time. But moving forward, this is going to be even more valuable. Because some of our questions changed, the copy request that you see up here on the right, it's a blue button. That means any question that you answered that's the same as the last RFA will be automatically uploaded into your new application. And that means you got to go in there and edit and still fix it and change things from 2019 to 2020, but it will help you save some time. So the copy process button is for anyone that has applied last year. And because we refined this year's application and we spent so much time with it, we think this same template is going to be used in the future, making that copy process request button even more important and as a tool for you. So if you go in, you will also see your award details. There's a tab for follow-ups. When we need additional documentations, last year when we had people who applied and they, like Janie mentioned, applied for the whole amount and of that entire pool within that section, maybe it was a CDFI and they said, we want $1 million. And they ended up getting 300,000 or 400,000. Well, in that area, we said we've awarded you, but instead of $1 million, here's how much you're getting. Please adjust your budget narrative and your budget template to reflect the amount awarded. You can choose to decline your overall award at that time, but we didn't have that happen with any of our applicants that had to adjust or amend their former application. But that's one of the times we use the follow-up button. We're also going to use that follow-up section for all of our quarterly reports and your final report. And the document in here will be your award that you've your whole application and your award letter, your agreements. And you also have the ability to print a PDF version of your former application. All of your uploads that you uploaded in your previous application will also be saved. So the critical dates are, again, we open on April 1st, 2020. We close on June 1st, 2020 at 11:59 Central Time, which is really important depending on where you live. I've missed grant deadlines because I thought it was Pacific and it was Eastern. So pay attention to Central Time. We do have a flexibility period for those that are affected by COVID-19. We've extended until June 15th, 2020 at 11:59, but you need to let us know before June 1st that you're going to need those extra 2 weeks. Our website is where you can find all of this valuable information, and this webinar will be recorded and uploaded. And you'll find our RFA, our Q&As. You'll have access to our technical assistance, which you can email at grants@nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. So please visit our website, download our documents, anything that you might need to look at before you start your application.
Thank you, Tony. So at this time, I want to show you our website in case you need any help navigating there. So give me one moment. Here we are. If you go to nativeamericanagriculturefund.org, this is the homepage that you'll come to. You see there's several ways to get to the 2020 RFA page. One is right here. It says apply now, or you could go up to grants. If you hover over grants, you see 2020 RFA and click there. That's going to take us to the page that has all the documents for you to download and step-by-step instructions. So if you find the green tractor, you're at the right spot. If you scroll through, you'll see lots of information for you. Really important part, this red button is a direct link to the Found It website, and that's where you do your online application. So go ahead and click that red button and set up your application profile as soon as you are ready to. Below that red button, there are a number of tabs that have more detailed information. I just want to show you a few. One important one is downloads. If you come here, everything that's underlined is actually a PDF. And so if you click those, it opens up, you can print it out or you can view it on your computer. The 2020 RFA overview is a 20+ page document that walks through every section, every detail. That is your manual. The 2020 RFA Process General and 2020 RFA Process Youth is a PDF of the exact questions that you'll find in the online section. So as Tony was referencing, if you are unsure about this, before you create an account, come here to our website, open the process for general or the process for youth, look at the questions, see if it fits, and then create an online account. We do accept paper applications, and if you are thinking about that, you can reach out to us and we will send you a hard copy packet, but you could also download all of these things and fill it out that way. And just want to show you one more spot. All of you registered for the webinar, so you found this at some point. Here are the remaining ones, webinar number 4 and number 5, and you can register for those. And then if you scroll down, here's the button where you will find recordings. So we already have 2 previous recordings available, and today's will be available tomorrow on our website. But please do look through all of these tabs. Hopefully it's good information for you. Now I want to transition to our question and answer period. So you can still submit questions. Go to the questions part of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you don't feel comfortable asking it here, reach out to us by phone or by email. Janie and Tony, I will read out the question and then I will let you address it.
Okay.
So our first 3 questions are from the same listener, and they all revolve around limited waiver. So the first one says, what does the limited waiver of sovereign immunity mean? We are partnering with the local tribe, but we're not sure what we're asking them to give up when they sign a limited waiver.
So my first question to the listener is, if you're not a tribal government, then I'm assuming that the applicant is not the tribal government.
Yeah, so the applicant is partnering with the local tribe to write the application. The tribe would be the main applicant.
Okay, your contact within the tribe is going to very well know what the limited waiver of sovereign immunity is. They would not be giving that to you as a participant on the project with them. They would actually be giving that to us. And so the tribal government itself, or whoever on their team handles this sort of thing, needs to just reach out to us. Every tribal government I know knows exactly what limited waiver of sovereign immunity is.
Okay, thank you. And if you have more questions, please reach out and we can provide that draft of the limited waiver. Our next question says, where can I find the 4 eligible entity types?
Listed in the trust agreement?
Yes.
It's in section 8, is it not?
Correct. Section 8 of the trust agreement lists the 4 eligible entity types.
Okay.
Next, can you define further what capital expenditures may entail?
Normally, capital expenditures can mean, big pieces of equipment. Sometimes they can mean actual structures. And so there are some examples of what we mean by capital expenditures that are in the budget narrative. So take a look at that. If you still got questions about what you're thinking about including in your budget and whether it means, a capital expenditure, then just give us a holler. It's usually bigger ticket items, equipment, and structural issues that really become assets, if you will, of the project.
Thank you. Next question. If we provide scholarships to future agriculture students, can the application be for the 24-month period to serve 2 years of recipients?
Sure, absolutely.
Our next question says, how can you clarify how business assistance is considered charitable/educational? These seem incongruous.
Business assistance, let me give you an example. NAAF is currently partnering with one of our 2019 grantees, and we are, and another organization that is involved in all the CDFI work. And we are already putting out a series of, I think, was it 6 webinars, Carly?
Yes,
that literally provide business plan training and education. That is considered to be a charitable activity, to literally provide that sort of kind of granular business plan training in agricultural enterprises. It's also considered educational. So when we talk about business assistance, it's literally not just providing loans or capital. It is literally providing support that can assist folks in their business. And some of the most critical is assisting people with marketing plans, redoing their marketing plans, finding new markets, or if they're, and this is all if they're in commercial, agricultural or fisheries, or working with their business plan or the type of business organization they have, because there's all sorts of different types that they could do. So all of that would be considered business assistance. It's not just providing capital. It's literally providing support in an educational or a technical support kind of model that helps folks have a more successful approach.
thank you. Our next question is about webinar recording. Will this webinar presentation be available later? The answer is yes. We will post it on our webinars page under the grants tab. So if you go to our website, you hover over grants at the top, you'll see a drop down list, and one of those will be webinars. If you click there, you can see all of the what we've had so far. Next question. Can you apply for both the youth programming and the general process?
Yes. I'm going to have little short answers if that's all I need to say. So.
Thank you. And I'll also say you can apply for multiple categories within the general, so long as you are eligible for those categories. For example, if you are a nonprofit, you could not apply as a tribe under targeted tribes, but you can apply for all that you're eligible. Our next question is about funding limits and caps. And so I'm wondering if you would be willing to give an overview of the funding limits and caps again.
Tony or Carly, do you have those right in front of you?
Yes, so please don't mind the rapid flipping of the PowerPoint, but we will go to the pages where it has this. So CDFIs has a pool of 4 million. There is no explicit cap on what you can ask for, but please keep in mind that we intend to fund several, and so it's unlikely that anyone who requests the full amount would be awarded that. Next is targeted funding education. There's a total of 2 million available. Again, there's no explicit cap, but keep in mind that it's unlikely any one organization would have the full amount. For 501c3s, there's a pool of 3 million. Again, no explicit cap, but keep in mind that no applicant should seek the entirety of the available pool. For tribes, there is a cap, no more than 150,000 for a targeted tribes application. Special emphasis funding, traditional foods, projects in the range of 50,000 to 100,000. Advocacy, there is a pool of 1 million and NAAF intends to fund at least one project in this area. Youth programming, we ask you to look at projects up to 50,000, but it doesn't have to be 50,000. That's just the top. And agriculture extension, there's a pool of $1 million available and no cap on what you can request. So if you have any additional questions about that, please let us know. Each of these, if there is a cap, it is specific to that category, but you can apply for multiple categories and there is no total application cap. Okay. Next question, Janie, does the youth programming project have to be related to business assistance and focus? We have 2 sites and our business assistance project is connected to them and we may choose a youth program on our primary. So when you're working with youth, does it have to be business assistance?
No, it does not. In fact, if you go back through the slides and you pull up the youth programming slides, and actually if you look at the RFA in the youth programming area, we give you a lot of examples that are not just business assistance.
Okay, thank you. Our next question says, we have a FERTEP program in our community and are looking at submitting 2 complementary proposals, one for extension and one for the tribe. Would that be looked on favorably or would you discourage multiple submissions from the same community?
I think that's fine so long as they're not a mirror image of each other. It sounds to me like from the question, I think I heard that they're complementary. They just happen to be working with the same audience. And so that would not be a problem at all, so long as, you know, one of them has one area they're working in with that audience and the other project has another set of things that it's doing. That would be fine.
Okay, so we have a question. How many applications were received in 2019 and how many were funded?
I think I went over this earlier. We received far in excess of what we could fund. We actually received applications for over $50 million worth of funding. We funded 10 million and we funded over 100 different projects for a little bit over 80 different organizations. So that was quite a big group that we funded.
Next question says, I've downloaded the budget format, but wondered if there is a preferred format for the proposal itself in terms of content, program description, etc.
Tony, you might take this because that really is guided by the questions that are in fondant.
If you look at the RFA and you look at additional scoring or you look at the section you're applying for, it discusses what can be funded in that area, and then in the application itself, we only provide a limited space for you to fill that out because there's so many different places where you can enter that information that we didn't. This is not a federal grant. You're not going to have a 300-page application. We want you to narrow it down, where last year we said goals, ambitions, objectives. This year we just said, what are your objectives and what can you get done in this project period? So if it's for 1 year, what can you get done in that one period? And also we took out areas where we asked you, what are some of the issues that you see in your community and we asked or that you're gonna overcome? And we asked that in a bunch of different areas, and we are almost everyone on our staff is Native American. We're from Indian country. We know the issues, so we didn't need you to keep saying that. So we made it easier this year. Identify specifically, maybe you have a low graduation rate or you don't have an agricultural extension for your tribal college. You guys have a food desert, whatever it might be, just be really specific.
Thank you. And if I may, I want to share screen here. I just went to our page. 2020 RFA page, and there's a link. It says 2020 RFA Process General. Same thing for the youth. If you open this, you can see exactly how we ask the questions. I'm going to scroll down to one area and show you how it's laid out. We are asking questions like, what is your project title? What is your budget request? How long is your project? Then there's project narrative. Beyond what we have here, there's no specific format. Just tell the story the best that you can. And as Tony said, be specific. And we appreciate that you highlight the main points. We have an option for key personnel. This is a required spot for you to tell us who's doing the work on your project. And as she mentioned, objectives. And finally, a summary statement. Tell us everything you're going to do with that in 1 or 2 sentences. So that's the amount of formatting that we have. Okay, next question. Is it allowable for budget funds for meals during farmer workshops? From our experience, people are encouraged to attend workshops when meals are provided.
As Tony already said, we're not a federal granting authority. We're a private charitable trust. So we're fine with that. Just make sure you talk about it in your budget.
Okay. So next question. How much can you request for travel?
I'm going to share with you all, this is a tricky question right now because nobody is really being allowed to travel very much. So my gut, and we've talked amongst it within the staff, is we're going to encourage you to put some nominal amount. Like for instance, in 2019, we actually had all of the grantees that we approved had about $1,000 or so dollars in their budget for travel to a grantee meeting. Well, the grantee meeting was going to be, mid-year this year. None of us can do it, so it was totally called off. And so we've just been talking to our 2019 grantees individually. It is way too early to tell whether we're going to have an in-person grantee meeting. So that's why I suggested to everybody on the call that you just put, $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever you think is appropriate to, if you were fully up and running and able to travel and gather, then go ahead and put that travel money in your budget. But if we all are in a place where you're an approved grantee and, prolonged shelter in place or restrictions on travel from public health authorities kick in, then we're just going to be working with all the grantees to shift those funds around so that they can use them for other purposes. But go ahead and just put something in there that makes sense for your project if you were able to actually function in a full travel mode. And then we'll work with you if you can't.
I'm going to follow up on what Janie said. If your project is based on traveling, maybe you're in a remote community and you need to travel to the various villages within your community to administer training or equipment, whatever it might be, then that can be a majority of your application if that's what it takes. Maybe you're in Alaska and you have travel is a very precarious situation, and so that's not capped anywhere. But our goal for NAAF in general is to get as much funding to Native farmers and ranchers as we can.
Well, and our goal too is to not breathe down your neck if you're an approved grantee to travel when we know it's unsafe, right? We're never going to do that with you all. And so, I think between what Tony said and I said, that should be enough guidance. But if you still got questions, then just give us a holler as soon as you can.
Thank you. Next question. When is funding expected to be deployed to grantees?
Probably, I hope late summer. That's about as good as I'm going to get because we have to go through the trustees and meet with them and have them approve the final docket for which grantees we fund, and it'll be dependent on their schedule, but we're trying to get it done much earlier in the year, in this calendar year, than we were able to last year. So we hope to be able to move funds late summer.
Thank you. Do all applicants need to submit a letter of authorization / support from their board of directors or governing body?
Tony, you want to handle that one?
I would say yes, but it's not mandatory. What's mandatory is that you have your eligibility document in place. If in order to supply your eligibility to apply for this grant incorporates some type of resolution supporting your tribe, your educational institution, or your nonprofit, then yes, you'll need that. But I'm also going to say we had a resolution and a letter from a tribal chairman, and they supported the application. But then after they were approved and we said, can we get a waiver of immunity? They said no. So sometimes you'll have that, and in the end, it won't mean anything. But we are working so hard to get this funding out that if we have the area where you can have a fiscal sponsor, so if it doesn't work out in one area, we'll work to make sure that you can still get the funds that were awarded. But it just depends on what type of entity you are.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you. And I
Let
will
me
mention,
give you a further example of that. If you teach at a college or university, you likely don't have the authority to obligate that university. You could submit the application, perhaps, if your internal protocol allows you to do that, but you likely are not considered the authorizing official that can sign documents. So it always, you know, it's back to what Tony said, depending on the type of organization you are. If you're a small nonprofit, that's probably, we're talking way more complicated than you are. But if you are a bigger institution that has layers of authority, including tribal governments, then, you know, the application can go ahead and come in. But if you're selected for funding, we're going to have the proper authorizing official to sign all the documents.
I know we ask you, I beg you, don't apply unless you know that you have the authority to apply, that you have the support to apply, because it's not fair to other applicants who are ready to go and who are ready to get those funds into their mission area or into their communities. We did have a few applicants who applied but didn't have the full support of the entity they were representing. And we have a section in your application for supporting letters. Those are optional, but we like to see in that section, if you're saying, I'm partnering with such and such organization or office within my tribe, and they're going to work together, we're going to do this part, they're going to do that part, then we want a letter from them saying, yeah, we have knowledge of this and we do support it.
thank you. Next question. I am listening in on behalf of a land-grant university that works with multiple tribal communities. If we want to apply for a youth program in 2 different tribal communities, can one institution apply for 2 youth grants? Alternatively, we could work with a local tribal fiduciary, just checking on options.
Those would be working with 2 different youth groups, so I see no problem with those coming in as separate applications. That would not be a problem. You'd have to have the different tribes, you know, sign on, obviously, to them being willing for you to work with them, clearly. But I really don't see a problem with that.
Carly, do you have any comment on that as far as getting in the system?
Yes. So if that's your intention, please reach out to us. The way the system is configured is to accept 1 application from in each category. So for example, when you're going to upload your youth budget, there's only 1 upload file link. And that is to say that you can't just if the limit is 50,000, you can't just say, well, here's 3 different budgets for 50,000 and somehow get 150,000, right? You're limited to that 50,000 in the area, but there's only one upload. So if that's the case for you, please reach out to us and we will make accommodations in the system, but please do that as early as you can. The next question is about webinars. Are the future webinars different from this one? The answer is yes and no. The first part of the webinar is the same slides every time. The last part, the Q&A, is very dynamic and it's different every time. As Janie said, we tried to take the novel questions and turn those into new FAQ elements and post those on the website. But if you are interested in hearing the Q&A, one thing I would suggest is go to our recording, skip to about 1 hour and 20 minutes into the recording. That's approximately where Q&A starts, and then you can hear the different questions that were asked each time. Okay, next question. If you apply for funding for $75,000 for a project that is 24 months, does that mean it's $75,000 for 24 months or $75,000 per year for 2 years?
$75,000 for the entire period.
Where do you find the sample tribal resolution? You can email us, grants, Grants, at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. If you email and request that sample limited waiver, we'll send it to you. If you are talking about a tribal resolution for approving the application, we have no template for that. We defer to your tribe and the way that you structure official communication. So let us know if you have other questions. Next, is NAAF still considering ways to reduce the cost of large equipment through group purchasing? If so, how should we estimate that expense?
So that's 2 different questions. One of the questions is, yes, NAAF is very interested in figuring out ways that equipment purchasing costs can be more efficient for all tribal members everywhere. I've actually had significant conversations around that issue. It's going to take us a little bit more time to actually work through potential solutions, and those we will bring everybody along in the process. But if you're talking about equipment purchases for a project that you're working on, my best guidance to you is to spec out the equipment that you think you need. If you think it's appropriate, you could put it in your application. But equipment is one of those overriding issues that every native farmer, rancher, fisher, everybody actually needs. And so this is a bigger mega issue that we're all going to have to kind of work together to kind of solve, because as an example, we could deplete these funds very, very quickly and literally buy 10 pieces of large equipment. And I don't think anyone on this phone call or any of the NAAF grantees would particularly like that to happen. It might benefit 1 or 2 tribes, but at the end of the day, it's not going to solve the equipment issues that we need to have solved. So that's one of those issues that's going to have to continue to be worked on by us, by the trustees, by kind of all parties involved. But if you're going to include equipment in your actual application, just be mindful of what it is you're asking for and what the cost needs are, and be very clear about it.
Thank you. And I just want to take this opportunity to invite you to ask your last lingering questions. I have one more question to read right now, but if you have one, put it in, please. This is a clarification from before. It says, if we submit a business assistance proposal for a particular population and purpose, can the youth program proposal be entirely separate and focus on a different population in a different area?
Yeah, I think we've answered that a couple of different ways already, and of course they can, but again, I think you've got to be mindful of multiple applications coming in that would basically do the same thing. We need you to reach out to us and talk to us about it now, so that you don't get jammed up in the system itself.
I think that you would be fine if the technical part was in the general RFA and the youth part was in the youth RFA process, as long as those are two different processes.
Right. That'll work.
Okay, so one last invitation for questions. You can always reach us by phone, 479-445-6226, or by email, grants, GRANTS, at nativeamericanagriculturefund.org. We're also on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on LinkedIn, pretty available. Please reach out to us with your questions early and often. We do our best to get back to you in a timely manner. With no other questions in the queue, Janie and Tony, I'll give you the opportunity to wrap up.
Tony, you want to wrap us up today?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into our webinar. We still have 2 more webinars to go. Our last webinar will focus on Q&A. And again, you can continue to ask questions at our grants at nativeamericanagriculturefund.com or .org email, and make sure that you go into our system and on our website, and you can look at our former questions. We update those. And again, thank you for joining us, and stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.